Specialists of Reddit. What is a dead giveaway? Someone is faking his her knowledge in your area? When I was a lawyer, I did family law, divorces, child custody, etc. The real fun stuff. Yeah, no. In family law, in the counties I practiced in anyway, the parties are called petitioner and respondent. The moment someone, even an attorney here or there, called them plaintiff or defendant, you knew they weren't familiar with this practice area. A slip up here or there is understandable. But when an attorney is constantly calling the parties by the wrong title, you knew they didn't know it about family law. I've also worked in the aviation field for a long time with vintage World War II aircraft. Aircraft then, like military aircraft now, had names attached to the model. So you have the P-51 Mustang, B-25 Mitchell, B-17 Flying Fortress, etc. When they start referring to the B-17 as the Liberator or the P-51 as a Hellcat, you know pretty much everything else coming out of their mouth on this topic is utter bullet. Not my current field, but myself being a veteran. This applies as I've seen it. Someone who was never in the military, but wants you to think they were will almost always tell you they were special forces. Someone who was actually any sort of spec ops will usually tell you they were a truck driver or a fuel specialist. Overkill with the buzzwords and acronyms. My industry unfortunately is full of them. When my idiot of a principal goes up to one of my students with autism and very sternly says, "Look at me." This is after he claimed to have extensive knowledge of autism and told us he considered himself to be on the spectrum because he has ADHD. He also insists on being called doctor. I hate the guy. The words "that's not fair" will never be spoken by any real lawyer. Fairness was tossed out the window and burned alive your first year of law school. History. They give short answers to very complex questions without any qualifying remarks. Making difficult historical concepts simple is both the mark of a great historian and a terrible one. Essentially it's like two people have been assigned the job of assembling IKEA furniture. When they finish they both have leftover pieces. The good one lets you know there are leftover pieces that should probably get more attention. The bad one simply tosses them in the bin and hopes no one notices. Unfortunately, as every politician knows, the public generally prefers the latter. When they switch to sniper when we already have 3 and no medic on offense. Computer programmer, although I suspect this transfers to any field. Feeling the need to explain fundamental or basic concepts which everyone else just assumes to be understood. If you launch into a lengthy explanation of any concept that even a fresh grad should be able to understand, that raises all kinds of red flags if you are meant to be even moderately experienced. Especially if this presented in a way that makes it appear that you believe that you are explaining something that others might not know. That suggests that this information is the frontier of your knowledge. Confirmed kills. A large majority of soldiers who have actually killed enemy don't talk about it. I was watching Formula 1 the other day and my new roommate told me F1 drivers always pull off the best drifts. I've had people tell me there's no difference in the skeletons of different ethnicities after claiming to have a relevant degree. Mate, it's like one of the first things you learn. You can tell with a higher level of confidence what ethnicity someone was based on their teeth alone, for Christ's sake. Let alone the skull. I'd say if someone thinks the most dangerous part of flying is turbulence, icing, microbursts, wind shear, thunderstorms, controlled flight into terrain, etc. are all worse. You can have extreme turbulence, but it's less frequent than most of the other hazards I mentioned. A lot of people try to use really niche medical terms when giving out awful advice here. I'm guessing it's to sound smart, but anyone in the field would simplify any explanation to ensure understanding. Also, don't take medical advice from people here. I read about someone putting foods in their hoo-ha. These people can't be trusted. Chemistry. Some things just don't happen. Like chlorine spontaneously evolving from chloride. And when people intimate, there is a small chance of something occurring when there is zero chance of it occurring. It is very obvious to someone who knows better. Ask questions and make statements that sound relevant to everyone else who doesn't know how it should work. That's one of the managers at my manufacturing plant. He is very smart in some areas, but will not admit that he needs to learn how manufacturing works. Sees a graph and gets irritated at the number. Why don't you just do buzzword out there? Double quote. Well, you see, explain basic manufacturing process and problems repeat every day. There are tons of annoying high and mighty elitists among classical music fans. There are also tons of stories from musical history that are outright false and even absurd, yet still get passed around as fact by surprisingly many who consider themselves experts. The Mozart-Salieri rivalry from the Amadeus movie, where Salieri pretty much drives Mozart to his death, is infamous. Then there's the Goldberg variations by Bach, supposedly written to help a count fall asleep. Lascia Chio Pianga, made famous in the Farinelli movie, does not actually belong to a castrato part. It's sung by the character Almairina, a female soprano. And that's only the top of the iceberg in that movie. My favorite part, however, is getting into Bach cantatas. There are quite a few, and not many are familiar with all their names, including me, to be honest. You can string people along by making up it if you know a bit of German and they don't. Roher hast du Männer Schaaf versteckt is my go-to. I also like to sneak in some Brazilian soccer players among Italian operas. Ronaldo, Olinda, Orlando, Ronaldinho. Trust me, I'm an engineer. In mathematics, any document not written in LaTeX, referring to physics as a justification for a mathematical claim, especially when it is handled VBS about quantum mechanics, relativity, or string theory, a tone of amazement or wonder when talking about something that is, to a mathematician, extremely mundane, such as complex numbers. Also, referring to complex numbers as imaginary numbers. Claims of a proof of or solution to any of the Riemann hypothesis, P equals NP, the Collatz conjecture, squaring the circle, or Fermat's last theorem. Admittedly, there has been exactly one exception to this rule. Feed that green mamba for me. If they don't get bit, then they probably know what they're doing. If they tell me to duck off, then they could still be an expert though. If you brag to others about building your own computer, you're probably not some IT wizard. Good job. You assembled a Lego set for adults. They regurgitate common facts that appear all of the time in poorly researched web articles or old wives' tales. Grizzly bears can't climb trees. If a bear sees you, you should play dead. It like that. Anyone who suggests anything approaching HTML is programming. Anyone who says anything about firewalls in an online discussion that isn't talking about outbound traffic. Anyone who suggests company A is incompetent for not having reliable service. Because company B did it so easily, despite having only 1/10th the traffic. People who think Microsoft products suck. People who think new Linux will never catch on. People who don't understand that you get 1 in a million bugs quite often when you have 100 million customers' instances running 24 hours per day. People who think Java is just as performant as C. People who think C++ is a superset of C. People who think strlen can check if a string is too long. People who think C is dead. People who say we need more another level of abstractions. People who don't truly grok how spaghetti evolves. People who say object-oriented when they slap getters setters on everything. People in my field who think they're superior to the rest of the business. People who got an A in their college courses who see garbage everywhere they look. Because they don't understand the complexities of the real world. Politics, they don't know the difference between authorization and appropriations. Neuroscience don't know the difference between neurons and glia. Anything gene related, especially when it comes to CRISPR. Yeah, I'll make my baby have a 315 IQ using CRISPR. I'm looking at your futurology. They talk too much about a specific topic when a few words are all that's required. People who talk about how tannins give them headaches. People who say if it says reserve or cuvee or select on the bottle then it's better quality won't give them a headache. People who want sulfite-free wine rather than no added sulfites. People who turn their nose up at screw tops. People who think Burgundy, or Bordeaux or Chianti, is a type of grape. People who think you can't get a good bottle for $12. People who think Merlot sucks. I'm not a specialist, just a psych grad student, but I've noticed something that differentiates an expert from a self-acclaimed guru. Someone who is faking one's knowledge in psychology will give clean-cut, direct, black and white answers about human behavior. Subject matter experts' answers will be extremely convoluted because they know that research findings are contradictory and require replications and meta-analytic reviews. They also know that research findings can only be generalized to a certain extent, that each theory or model has its own bunch of criticisms, and that research findings must be interpreted with caution. Typical subject matter expert responses will be, "Oh, it depends," or "research findings are inconclusive." For example, I vividly remember someone asking a self-help guru about the role of touch in relationships, and he simply said, "Women need touch more than men." The following is a researcher's answer to the same question. Sex differences in touch are dependent on many interacting factors such as who initiates the touch, who receives the touch, the situation in which the touching occurs, why the touching occurs, and how long the touch lasts. She then went on to explain how each of these factors influence the 6 differences in touch. For example, men and women touch equally after a positive event, but women touch each other more than men after a negative event. When they don't know the difference between the different series of aluminum alloys or stainless steel alloys and other metals and such. Hipsters who've never farmed talking about grass-fed chicken. Chickens couldn't survive on a grass-fed diet. When lawyers say they major in international law. Honestly, if they're one of those die-hard Richard Dawkins fans, they probably haven't studied evolution since the 80s either. Just because you heard of survival of the fittest in high school or the internet doesn't mean you are an evolutionary biologist. Yeah, I don't put salt in my food. I like to taste the food, not the salt. Someone pretending to be a cook. They don't know the military lingo. Not knowing which way round an incontinence pad, adult-sized diapers for the people I work with, goes. Thinking that they can punish someone for bad behavior, this is actually abuse. Not knowing about dolls, deprivation of liberty safeguarding, or the Mental Capacity Act. Most people I work with, apart from management, couldn't go in depth into the legal aspects, but will be able to give you a pretty good overview. When they mention Bach's Fifth Symphony instead of Beethoven, Bach, a Baroque musician, never composed symphonies in the classic romantic style. When I can play buzzword bingo with them. Not my current field, but something I have a lot of background in. Basically when people claim to be all about conservation and being eco-friendly, etc. Anything in that ballpark really. It's really easy to tell because they'll say something that sounds legit to the public, but is ridiculous to any actual conservationist. For example, I did some work with sea turtles. Some species of sea turtles have mass nesting events on one single beach. The mass nesting lasts about a week. At one point, locals were poaching so badly that we weren't sure the population would be recovered. It's not where it used to be, but it's way better than it was. They lay so many eggs that the nests created earlier in the week end up getting destroyed. That being said, the WWF made an agreement with the locals. As long as they don't poach, they can collect the eggs early in the week that would normally just get destroyed. Not long ago, the internet caught wind of this. People were spewing complete nonsense about how wrong this is to be allowing locals to eat turtle eggs, etc. Basically, you can tell when someone doesn't know a damn thing about conservation when they say stuff like that. Conservationists try to compromise more than anything. This is also why hunting is okay as long as you have the proper permits, etc. Equine industry. Anyone who makes statements implying the words always or never with regards to the care or training of horses. Blank look when you ask them to explain OC model. Anyone who gives you any sort of definite answer is not a lawyer. If someone refuses to 100% commit to something basic, they may be a lawyer. If you ask someone if the 24-hour Walmart is open, and they say probably, they might be a lawyer. Buddy back in high school kept insisting that my sedan could drift better than his Mustang because my car's a FWD. I'm a civil engineer. Anyone telling you that the WTC tower collapses were controlled demolitions is not the physics, engineering, or architectural genius PhD whatever they are claiming. Nor are they representing any. It's basic stuff that anyone who made it through a course of study would know and not be surprised by. The list of architects and engineers for 9/11 truth hasn't really grown in numbers since 2008 when I first checked it, so that's also a huge red flag. I actually had a nuclear physicist claim that I was trying to blind him with science when I critiqued his research paper on the subject. I kid you not. The paper featured bad high school, that is, Newtonian, physics to claim the towers should have tipped over like trees. So, definitely not an actual physicist of any sort, because a physicist would know about advances in physics beyond the 17th century. Any mention of anything related to taxation. There are so many common misconceptions and so easy to spot once you know the tax code. I don't want that raise because it'll bump me into a new tax bracket and cost more in the long run. Not American, nor an expert, but use a very similar progressive tax system and a basic understanding of how it works, and my god, I want to smack the it out of them. Iraq War veteran here. Anytime someone claims they were overseas on war but then starts talking about all the cool and exciting as they did, they haven't been in war. That's the dead giveaway. Most vets don't talk about it. Ever know someone for a few months or longer, then all of a sudden you find yourself saying something like, Shane, I didn't know you were in Iraq. Yeah, it's because they don't want you to know. Then there are the guys who claim they were overseas and they are ducking annoying. They can't wait to pretend talk about their war experiences to complete strangers. We were ambushed and I was one of 6 guys that survived. They go into great details but can't remember the names of the brothers and sisters they lost. They just continue on about how awesome and fun their experiences were and they seem fine and didn't come back with any mental issues. Yeah, they're full of it. They go out of their way to mention they're having a CISSP certification. I had someone tell me their main programming language was C number. It honestly took me a minute to figure out he was talking about C. Computer security. If anyone claims they know everything they need to know, they're dumb as it. The smartest people I've worked with are the first to admit they don't know much about this topic. It's truly a cat and mouse game with criminals, so it's pretty difficult to claim you know everything that you need to know. For example, one of my co-workers got his PhD from FSU in cryptology, and even he claims that he doesn't deserve a PhD in the subject because it's evolving so fast that things that he studied 5 years ago are out of date. When a polyglot says they're a linguist, it's like saying someone with 20 diseases is a doctor. A person with 20 diseases probably knows a lot more than the average person about the human body and about disease. Similarly, polyglots at least have a good feel for the ways languages can vary, and might have encountered some linguistics along the way. Basically, not all linguists are polyglots, and not all polyglots are linguists, but the Venn diagram coincides a lot between them. Law. If anyone makes an unqualified statement, law is all about gray areas and unique situations. There's no such thing as an absolute answer when it comes to a legal question. Sitting in traffic court gave me my favorite quote from a judge. There are very few absolutes in law. Almost everything is hazy and it makes my job very difficult. However, there is one absolute. You must stop at a stop sign. So tell me, sir, did you stop? That guy got a ticket, by the way. Registered dietitian here. Everyone on the internet is faking. Seriously. Nutrition information is like some kind of drug for people. They get a little bit, then they go crazy down convoluted lines of reasoning, not understanding that they can't see the whole picture and that 99% of the time what works for one person is completely inappropriate for someone else. I am so sick of hearing the Broshans and Crossfitters, it has almost made me give up. I'm in construction. Usually when someone makes reference to pouring cement, it's concrete. Cement is an ingredient in concrete, along aggregate, rocks, and water.